Welcome to the reality show, day 145 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Robert Nasser and Jonathan Daon. Hey guys, how's it going?
Going well.
Later on in the show, we will talk about Israel and Ukraine, what that relationship is, what it should be, what recently happened, and well, more on that when we get to it. We're gonna start with talking about this guy, Yuval Avraham, was it? Who is made a documentary with a Palestinian about some plight of some Palestinian village and made a speech, received an award in a film festival in Berlin, made a speech. The speech was called anti-Semitic, and then he basically says he got death threats, says his family, people went after his family. And yeah, but I think before we get to the topic itself, I know that at least Jonathan has an issue with the title, an issue that I don't necessarily disagree with. So, Jonathan, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, it just well, hi everyone. So I think just Riefenstahl, she made propaganda for the Germans. She was a German. Mr. Avraham is making propaganda for the Palestinians, and he's an Israeli. So, in a sense, he's worse than Riefenstahl. He's betraying his own country. At least you can say a lot of bad things about Riefenstahl, but she wasn't a traitor. So. Um, yeah, that's my criticism of the title, but
All right.
he's a bad
Well,
guy.
I have some issue with that criticism, but Robert, I'll go to you just on the title before we get to the topic.
Yeah, no, I had the same reaction, and yet at the same time, maybe a good idea to be provocative in this case, make people do a double take and think twice about it. Because as Jonathan suggests, yes, it's in a way worse. You've got the traitorous aspect as well. It's good too because I think it's going to let us dive a little deeper into the story. So, yeah, I get the criticism, but I also get why it being extra provocative may be good in this case.
Yeah, so the trader aspect, that's not an issue I had with it. I had the issue of people might look at it and think I'm saying, he's creating propaganda for Israel, which is, basically it might not be clear that what I mean is he's an Israeli and he's creating Nazi propaganda. That was the point. So if that hadn't come across, let me make it clear that what I meant is what he's doing is Nazi propaganda while being an Israeli. I think what does make it worse, and what generally makes these people worse than the people who supported the Nazis in the 30s, is that today we have the historical example of the Nazis. In the
Yeah.
30s, you were right before it got to where it inevitably would have gotten. Today, we already know that, and yet we see this. We see, I don't know if you guys saw these scenes in Berkeley where Jews basically there was an event and pro-Palestinian protesters attacked it, smashed the glass doors, chanted Intifada. Intifada, of course, means violent action against Jews. That is what they mean by it. And when they say globalize the Intifada, that is a way of saying not just the area from the river to the sea should be Jew free, but the whole world should be Jew free. That is what it is meant by it, regardless of whether they tell you actually Intifada means equality and trans rights or whatever they try to push on you. So uh, yeah, that's side rant. Thank you, Akira, for also saying that the title is confusing. We will think
Well, one
about it.
more thing about the title, Razi, is Riefenstahl. It's agreed upon everyone, but she was a master of cinematography, and I doubt that it's the case with this gentleman. So there's also that aspect.
I mean, I haven't seen the quality of his work, but that wouldn't mind. That wouldn't matter either way. But yeah, if it's high quality, if it's low quality, it's the thought that counts. And this guy is evil either way.
Indeed.
Well, and one of the criticisms of him was for the speech he gave upon winning 2 awards at the Berlinale. So he has some skill. Now, his wins may have had a political motivation, but he couldn't have been entirely worthless in that regard. You're right. I'm sure that she was a greater filmmaker. She also has I was going to say virtue, but virtue isn't the right word. She has the trivial virtue of when she was asked, why did you do what you did? And, part of this is she's going to say whatever it is to get through the trials. She said, well, I did not know how bad the Nazis were. I didn't know about the camps. I didn't know, I just knew of Hitler as an inspiring person who was helping Germany out of a difficult situation. I would love to hear Yuval Abraham say that. He gives the same answer that Charlotte Church gave that was, referenced in yesterday's show and earlier today. That, when I say to the river, to the sea, I don't mean what you think I mean by it. When I say all the terrible things I mean, no, I don't mean what you think I mean by them. And you're right, they need to be held to that. But I do think that those of us who are critical, we need not take them at their word, but we need to address that. We need to do a better job address that rather than just waving it away and say, well, they should know better. No, we've got to do better than that because this is a major weakness and an important point. And why, well, we can get more into that, but it's part of the answer to the question, why the hell do people believe this stuff?
So, yeah, I mean, for me, a big part of the issue here, by the way, in case we do change the title, people will watch the first few minutes of this, hearing us discuss a title that is not actually the title, but that's why you should always watch live, people who are watching recorded, although we appreciate you as viewers. And there's something there's something that is particularly disturbing to me, when it comes to these to the pro-Palestinian Israelis. There's something disturbing to me when there's pro-Palestinian Jews outside of Israel, more so than non-Jews, and and then when it's people in Israel, people who inevitably, if it's not somebody, well, actually, inevitably they will have loved ones who either were, directly affected on October 7th or are, were a part of the response. So we're in the army, were called up on October 7th. Like there's nobody who isn't in some way involved. There's in terms of, needing to know better, there is none of Leni Riefenstahl's excuse of I didn't know where Hitler would take this. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't really matter because this is as if we're going to compare to Leni Riefenstahl, this is as if she made a propaganda movie for Hitler after the Holocaust. That's the equivalent here. This is October 7th happened, and these people in Israel, and there are many of them. It's not a percentage wise a huge chunk of the population, but there are so many in Israel who are now calling for a ceasefire, knowing a ceasefire means Hamas wins. And yeah, Jonathan, you're in Israel. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've grown up in a relatively right-wing environment. We always hate these kinds of leftists who go to the settlements and they make these films and they fight for these injustices. Now, indeed, a few injustices there. And these are really despicable human beings. They are really sellouts, and we have a long history, unfortunately, of Jews who sell out, the ones in the Holocaust, for example, who collaborated with the Nazis are the worst examples. the Judenrat, and these are the same kind of people. And in a sense, that's the easiest way to thing to do. Inside Israel, it's difficult to be like that, but when you go outside, you get awards. You're the hero. Imagine standing there in that films festival and saying something pro-Israel. Like it wouldn't have even gotten to that stage. So I think they are very cowardly people, very weak, and reprehensible human beings. One other thing I wanted to say about this is the timing. What a time to release such a film! Like, even if there was no October 7th, and you know, I guess he's working on the film for a while, and before October 7th, he already, like, probably the film was ready. I'm not sure, but I guess so. There's a war in your country. Why would you release such a film that puts your country in such a light? Like, what kind of person acts this way towards the place that he grew up in, the place that gave him freedom, and gave him the passport that enables him to go and travel to Germany and exhibit his art there. So what a despicable human being. So I think the timing is the key problem here with this. Like, you should have delayed that. At least you should have canceled it. You didn't address October 7th. You didn't say anything about that, like as if it never happened. And that's I think the worst part of it.
Yeah, and that's why he gets these great cheers from such an audience. Yeah, just mentioning the hostages within that would have probably changed the audience's reaction. Robert, just before I go to you, I will go to Daniel and say, yeah, Robert's title is let's go with that. Robert suggested here in our Zoom chat. Yuval Avraham, worse than Leni Riefenstahl, ? And yeah, that's
yeah, I like that.
less confusing a title. So let's go with that. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges in a time of war is precisely as you say, that because we're the good guys, we're going to respect free speech, we're going to respect other opinions, we're going to allow things to proceed in a democratic way. The irony there, of course, or there are several ironies there, but as was mentioned in the earlier show, the idea of democratic Islamism, we on the good guys' side, we're going to let people make these films and even let them distribute them because we want the conversation. We want all the opinions out there. If we're right, we want to be able to show that we're right by allowing people to speak. And yet, Jonathan's exactly right. This is treasonous. This is outrageous that this is happening, and whether it should be clamped down by the government or whether people should simply stand up and protest much louder than they are today. Yeah, the kind of courage that Jonathan's talking about, that is what we need. We need people to say, no, this is not okay. And this person here, he's going to have an audience, of course, of people on his side. But those people you talk about, those well, let's use the word cowards, those people in the middle, those people who think, well, there are injustices on both sides, the compromisers, the people who don't want to take a moral stand. We need to be able to say, no, that is not okay. That is not acceptable. We do need to have these conversations, but we need to have them from a morally forthright point of view. This Yuval, I get it. I get his viewpoint. I get what he's been through. He's seen one aspect of a complicated situation. He's focused on that. He's putting out what he's putting out. We need to be there to say, no, this is not, I won't even say it's not the whole story. This isn't even the story. The reasons for the kinds of actions going on in the West Bank that he documents with his friend Bassel Adra in these films, in this movie that he's released, which he's won these awards for. How can he not see? Well, he can see, and we can judge him for that. How can his viewers not see that to whatever extent these things are happening, and he's documenting that they're happening? The Israeli military is going into places, taking over residential properties and turning them into military operations. Why? Why would they do that? Why would the military? Oh, well, let's not ask that question. Obviously, it's because they're Jews. They're power hungry. They want all the land. They want to take everything over. They want to ruin everything. And forget the fact that on some days, tens, on some days, hundreds, on a bad day, thousands of rockets are fired primarily from Gaza, but also from the north into Israel. There are reasons why the so-called settlers are taking these properties. It's because they're military families. It's because they're doing what is necessary to keep this powder keg from exploding entirely. Is any of that in this film? Is any of that in the 2024 documentary film, No Other Land? Well, you can answer that question for yourself.
Yeah, Jonathan, your point on the timing of the film is something we've talked about in relation to the timing of some of the pro-Palestinian policies of Israel's supposed allies who decide, like Britain, whose foreign secretary has said, foreign minister has said that Britain will recognize a Palestinian state during the ceasefire. And again, we've said, I've certainly said I oppose the very idea of a Palestinian state. It's something that I think Israel at least should say this will never happen. And again, if 100 years from now the Palestinians happen to be the most civilized people on the planet, you can say, the life extension stuff ends up working and Netanyahu is still prime minister, he can say, you know what, that statement I made 100 years ago, I take it back. Things have changed. But for now, the statement should be there will never be a Palestinian state. That should be Israel's position post October 7th, and Britain's position should not be this happened and we will respond by rewarding you, because this has been the West's policy, it's been Israel's policy, and it's failed every single time. It's been the policy with regard to the Palestinians. It's been the policy of the U.S. with regards to any war that it has been involved in recently, and the result is always the same. If you say to people, terrorist attacks will result in us moving towards your position, you are encouraging them to commit terrorist attacks. A point about, all right, I had a few points here. I'm going to just say one of them now. So, Robert, you said you get his viewpoint. I have to say, I get the terrorists who participated in October 7th more than I get his viewpoints. People who have been indoctrinated from age zero, there's, of course, no justification, and they all deserve to die. But you can understand that somebody's indoctrination, this is all they've ever heard, this is what they've been brought up to, never heard a different opinion, and then they acted on it. He cannot claim ignorance. He cannot claim ignorance because in Israel, you hear different viewpoints. You hear the pro-Palestinian viewpoint. You hear the pro-religious Jewish theocracy viewpoint. You hear the pro-freedom viewpoint from time to time, and you can make your choice from those, or think, look at the facts and think and come up with something else. Again, know what happened on October 7th. There's something we're going to talk about in a couple of days, which is some of Israel's left who have been who have changed their mind after October 7th, which I have an issue with them as well. But they at least, they said, okay, this happened. I now see who these people are. Yuval Abraham also sees who these people are, yet he stands by and doubles down on his position. Jonathan.
Yeah, I want to say about this guy, like one thing that is very despicable here is that Israel has a legal system to deal with these injustices that have happened indeed. And the justice system have dealt with them. The lands have been returned, settlements have been removed. In cases that the Supreme Court has seen the evidence that shows that, yes, there's been an injustice, this is an example of how Israel is different. You cannot go to the Palestinian Authority, to the court, and appeal on anything. Instead of going to that route and treating a real injustice, what this gentleman is doing, he's creating a film about this from a very, I haven't seen the film, granted, but I assume it's from a very specific perspective. And then go to Berlin, to the country where to the same city where SS platoons have walked in there, where they removed where his family's own deaths have originated from. From that very place, he goes to show a film that shows Israel as the Nazis. What kind of person would do that? That's like psychotic. It's like, I don't have a lot of words to describe. You don't go, if you have a problem in your company, you don't go to the IRS. You don't go to, you deal with it internally. And if you fail to do that, then you go to other routes, but you deal with that internally. And there are channels to do that. And he just goes to Germany and shows Jews as the worst kind of people. Like, what kind of person is that?
Wait, I have to push back on that, because so had he been had he been born in Gaza and had the right views on the issue, he should absolutely not do things internally, let the world know who these people are. I mean, the problem with his position is his position. It is evil. It is absolutely pure evil, and with that, taking that into account, it's no surprise that he goes to the rest of the world. I mean, this is something that these I by the way, I replied, I couldn't help myself. I replied to one of his tweets, even though I try not to engage with such people. And if I tweet at them, it's usually a quote tweet, not a reply. But yeah, I think some of them really love being the token Jews of anti-Semites. And by the way, this is the longest tweet I've ever written. So I encourage people to go take a look at that at Rosie Ginsburg. Some people actually seem to love it, because you hear from anti-Semites, they always pause for the cause, of hey, here's our Jews. We're not anti-Semites. Here's a Jew. He's with us.
Yeah, he wears a yarmulke. Look. Yeah, but what I mean, Mazi, is that if he was honest, if he had an honest problem, he would have gone through the right channel to deal with that and not make a film. That's my point.
Yeah, but he has a dishonest problem.
Exactly.
Robert.
Yeah, and I need to say, when I say I understand where this guy's coming from, I'm not justifying his actions. I'm saying that I understand the context from which he's operating. The idea of, or the subject of Roger Waters of Pink Floyd came up in the previous hour, and I understand his psychology, even though he is 102% inexcusable. It's why I say I want to both reach a moral evaluation of these people, but also I want to understand what's going on here. It makes her arguments against them not less effective, but more effective. This is what this guy is doing, what this filmmaker is doing, is wholly unacceptable. But we need to be able to say why. And whatever he's been through, whatever his friend has been through, Adra has been through in the West Bank, we need to be able to take that to the next step and say, well, then what is the justification for what Israel has done? It's interesting. There are reports from the Times of Israel that I trust. There are reports from Al Jazeera on the other side of this, which are biased, but not actually as bad as I would have expected. And there are the reports in the middle from, your Fox News, your New York Times. And right smack dab in the middle of all of that, because it references all sides of this, is Jimbo Wales, the objectivist or former objectivist, and Wikipedia. And Wikipedia actually has a whole article, a whole page on Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel. Since 2001, Palestinian militants have launched tens of thousands of rockets and mortar attacks on Israel from the Gaza Strip as part of the continuing Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The attacks, widely condemned for targeting civilians, have been described as terrorism by, and these are all referenced, by the United Nations, the European Union, Israeli officials, and are defined as war crimes by human rights groups Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. There's some of the same organizations. People are saying, oh, now they're saying Israel's gone too far. No. In fact, this is a whole separate article on Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel in just 2023. And there's a whole article there and list of the attacks, and they actually break it down. The worst of the attacks, because they're scattered. Why do I mention this? This is the answer. This is the answer to Yuval. This is the answer to Basel Adra. This is the answer to the people who say, well, these people are just pointing out that, well, in the West Bank, they're taking civilian properties over for military. Of course they are. Tens of thousands of. This is nonstop, well before October 7th, that from the north and from the Gaza Strip, the rock, and we say, well, Israel's got the Iron Dome. Israel is the stronger in this conflict. Israel is the defender in this conflict. Add to that what happened on October 7th. And again, I want to understand what Abraham is going through. I want to understand what Basel Adra went through, not to excuse them, not to justify them, but to strengthen our stand in saying there is only one solution to this, and that is that Israel needs to win this war. And obviously, Hamas needs to be obliterated. Hamas, the one group that could stop all of this right now by surrendering and releasing all of the hostages, all of the deaths. There's 25,000 dead people in Gaza now. And it continues. Yes, it does continue. And it must continue until the initiator of this action surrenders, acknowledges that they were wrong, or at minimum that they're going to fail. Obviously, all of the militants then need to be executed or put in jail for life. I'm sure some will say that's what needs to happen. Obviously, all the hostages need to be released. Obviously, Gaza can no longer be self-governing. Look what they did when they were given that opportunity. I don't even remember what the question was, because my point is, again, because it's been brought up, I don't mean to excuse what the enemy does when I explain what the enemy does. We need to know why they're doing what they're doing, and it's not just, although it's not just that they're anti-Semitic.
Well, it did take almost half the show before, Robert, you and I have our first major disagreement. So yeah, at this point, Hamas needs to release the hostages, needs to surrender. That's a non-point. Hamas didn't do what they did in order to come to a point where they say, you know what, actually, yeah, we shouldn't be so mean to the Jews. Yeah, let's release them. Let's surrender. Let's negotiate. They negotiate, to have their the masterminds and foot soldiers of the next October 7th released, back to Gaza. But yeah, no, what needs to be done is not just Hamas needs to be obliterated, but the Palestinian national cause needs to be obliterated. Palestinian culture needs to be a thing of the past. The Palestinian people need to be defeated in Gaza and in the West Bank, because it is the same war, and because what is happening in the West Bank now is what Gaza was up until October 6th, which is whenever they can get some small attack through and kill maybe one or a few, that's not a big deal to anybody. Israel's not gonna, that's not okay. So what needs to be done is something as devastating, and the Nazi comparisons are right here, because it needs to be as devastating as what was done to Germany, what was done to Japan, in a way that basically it's made clear you cannot keep living like this, with your only purpose being, to cause death and destruction. You can't keep living like this, in the sense that if you attempt to, you will no longer live. That should be the clearest message. And yeah, so I think any talk of ending the war is wrong. Like that is not the end of the war should be the complete defeat of the Palestinians, and of course that is the end of one part of the war. Israel still needs to act in Lebanon, and somebody needs to do something about Iran. And yeah, that is my rant. I also forgot the question, but I stand by my answer.
Yeah, when I say they need to be dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century, I mean that more strongly than I think people realize. You're right. They need to be defeated, and they need to be defeated in the beliefs that made any of these attacks, even the smallest of these rocket attacks, the most ridiculous and ineffective of the, that makes all of that impossible, that makes them drop the desire or the idea of doing any of this and join us in the 21st century. Another question, a whole separate episode would be, can that be done in the context of Islam? Because frankly, they're going to have to leave that behind the way the West left Christianity behind, which I know we still have Christians in the West. We don't have real Christians in the West. And we need to get to where we only have Muslims in the Middle East to the extent that, well, we don't have real Muslims in the Middle East the way we don't have real Christians. No, you're right. They have got to leave, essentially, they've got to leave being Palestinian behind.
Yeah, and in terms of where the West is, yeah, there's a point here by Akira. People on the right call Dresden a crime. Yeah, I mean that's where we are today. Of course, the left, I think there's more of a consensus there. Michael says Razi for prime minister. Thank you, but no thank you. Like really, this, pretty sure I would not enjoy myself as much as I enjoy myself now, even though we're talking about the worst things possible. So no, I will not run, and I will not accept the job, although nobody will vote for me except you, Michael, which I appreciate. Jonathan, who might actually be prime minister, although I think you are 13 years too young before you can legally run in Israel, right? Or something like
I
that.
don't remember I think it's 25 to be precise. So no, it's like 4 years, 3 years younger. But maybe it's 35 actually, I'm not sure. Yeah, I agree with you, Razi, completely. And it's true what the guy is saying in the film. All these problems that we have with the houses are all a result of the occupation. And I agree with him. We have to end the occupation, and by doing that, we have to remove the Palestinian Authority and all of that. That is the moral thing to do. So in that sense, I agree with him. Let's end the occupation. That's the only way to secure peace in Israel, and the removal of the Oslo Accords. I think, Razi, we would agree that is the source of all these legal banter about these settlements, these small villages. So I think that would put this matter to rest.
Robert.
Yeah, I would just continue to say I don't want anything that I'm saying to suggest that I don't mean this war ends when Israel wins. And that does mean not just knocking out Hamas. You can look at where the rockets are coming from, and certainly Hamas is big on the list. But, Hamas took over from Fatah, and Fatah is still out there. Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Popular Resistance Committee, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, all of these organizations who have taken credit for firing rockets into Israel. Do any of these organizations have any chance of taking over Israel or taking out Israel? They're simply sowing chaos and mayhem. The idea that Gaza is a real threat to the existence of Israel? No, this is just murder and chaos. These groups need to be wiped out. Their ideology needs to be wiped out. The population needs to accept once and for all that supporting these organizations or anything like them will not work. It will have no future, and they will continue to be. See, part of the challenge, what are you going to do about the fact that these people believe this stuff? It's why I always want to combat the ideas as much as the actions. The one thing we agree on is Israel needs to win, and they need to win so compellingly that it knocks the fight out of the opposition? What does that look like? Well, there's a good question.
So, I going back to Yuval Avraham, I suggest going on his Twitter and going through some of the replies, other than of course mine, replies to his tweets, because it's interesting to see the messages of support. And I mean, there are a lot of replies. He's he's in the news nowadays. Going to the replies, clicking on the profiles and seeing what else the people who show support for him say. And now some of the replies I saw, said something like, "Well, how can you be against the occupation if you are an occupier? You live in Israel." And yeah, so that's a thing. The token Jews don't understand that they are also targets. They might not be the first target, but by the way, on October 7th, many of them were the first targets. The kibbutzim that were attacked were left wing. That is what a kibbutz is. It's a left wing. It's a Marxist village, and some of them, like there was the one famous story of the woman who was on the board of directors of B'Tselem, one of the most anti-Israel organizations in Israel, who dedicated her life to giving these people what they want, and ended her life really giving these people what they want. So yeah, it's interesting to see that it's not just October 7th that the token Jews ignore. It's also the support and who it is that supports them. They're very forgiving to anyone who is Kira says you can't do that because you quit Facebook. It's on Twitter. It's different. You can do it with a fake Twitter. You just look at it. Believe me.
Yeah,
And
maybe our producer can add the link to that, because Razi, your comment was very good. It didn't get a lot of reactions, but I think maybe because it was, it needed a TLDR version. Too long didn't read, because it's very long, but it's all worth reading, folks. If you haven't seen it yet, again, maybe Daniel can put the link right in the description there. And I hope it gets more engagement, because you answered on every point, and it was very good.
I
And you're
appreciate
right.
that. Yeah,
You're right. The reactions of other people look especially not just evil and immoral, but foolish. In You wonder, did they actually read what you wrote? They should. And
yeah, I appreciate that. I did it as a reply. By the way, when I say as a reply as opposed to as a quote tweet, and yeah, when I say it's the longest tweet I've ever written, I'm usually Twitter friendly on Twitter, so it's several times longer than whatever was previously the longest tweet I ever wrote. But yeah, I thought, because this was a reply to him saying that his family had to escape their home and so on, which is of course terrible. And yeah, it was important to give that context. There's a comment in the chat. Sorry, my crow epistemology, for people who are familiar with objectivism, can't handle long usernames. But somebody says, why isn't Israel flooding Gaza with leaflets regularly, telling the Palestinians that the war was caused by Hamas and Hamas only? So their anger should be directed towards Hamas, not Israel. Well, I can think of two reasons. It's either because Israel understands that the Palestinian people are the enemy, or it's because they don't understand. If it's because they understand, then why leaflet them? They know, they were a part of it, or they, at the very least, support it. If Israel doesn't understand that the Palestinian people are the enemy, then it what is it going to say in its own defense to these people? Like and that's a good question, because we see Israel doing that not in leaflets, but in its statements to the world, in its PR campaign. It's terrible, absolutely atrocious PR campaign, which is it's so apologetic about anything that Israel does in its defense. And yeah, so Israel, our support for Israel is at least mine is a support in the sense that I want to see them win the war. It's not a support for the way Israel is executing this war or any part of it, because I think that is not good. Jonathan.
I think it's due to environmental concerns. They're not doing that. The wood, the jet fuel, we don't want to waste that.
I mean,
So
I'd say we can email them, but I keep seeing TikTok videos from Palestinians in Gaza saying they don't have internet, so I don't think that will work.
yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, the criticisms that you're mentioning, it's just bizarre to me. I don't even know where to go with that. This again, Yuval Abraham, this filmmaker, and we talk about the people who are siding with him. How can they see what he's got to say and not see the rest of the story? And the answer is that they're accepting the same narrative that our college students here in the United States are. And it's an outrage. It's an outrage when you refer them back to what actually happened on October 7th. It's an outrage when you refer them back to what's been happening since 2001 and really throughout the history here. And at some point, I'm not going to go on another rant. I don't have much else to say about that.
Well, I see that Daniel shared my tweet in the live chat, so I encourage people to go see that. Like, share, not share, share, repost, and follow. But of course, yeah, give it some love before Yuval Abraham notices it and blocks me, because yeah, then that tweet will, I don't know if it'll still be seen.
Well, my hope is that he would offer you his explanation, which means his excuses, and that people will actually engage with it. He doesn't seem like the type to just block you. He seems, because he's
Maybe,
got enough
but
of his hooligans around that they'll, try to make fun of it. And that's good. I want as many people to read that as possible.
well, Owen Jones didn't seem like the type who will block me, and now, it's all over between us. So you never know.
Oh, did he
Uh,
do that?
yeah, he blocked me like
Wow.
a month
Well,
or
I
so
shouldn't say
ago.
wow because he's kind of scummy, but I'm still surprised that he didn't want the engagement, that he didn't want the controversy, just for the clicks, just for the views.
He engaged a little bit. He called me a liar a few times, but yeah, he blocked my personal Twitter. That's why any engagement between us and him is through the ARCUK official Twitter. Um, Akira asks, do you think Israel could win if Bibi was pushed out of office, Razi? No. I think just Bibi should be pushed out of office because he doesn't deserve to be there. I don't think anybody else would do what I'm suggesting we do. So a few days ago, there was a comment. I really regret not saving this one, but there was a comment on one of our videos, which was um, it was it was the person was saying they agree with us on Israel, but they really didn't like what I believe it was I had to say on Ukraine. And the thing is, this wasn't some troll, this was well written in paragraphs and everything. But the content of it was shocking. And it was, things like Putin attacked Ukraine to defend himself or so on. And it's this shocking opinion that you keep hearing. And this is when I look at how the West, when I look at the West's downfall, I think the American right specifically, their position on this is a big, scary part of that. The fact that they are not clear on how important it is for America to support Ukraine. And if we haven't been clear enough, I don't think we mention it enough, but it is the same war. It's the same war, by the way, and Ukrainians know it. There was a recent poll where 80% of them said they support Israel. I don't know if that's the same, if even among Israelis the support is that high. It certainly isn't anywhere else. Russia knows it, and the Palestinians know it. Russia has invited the different Palestinian factions to come to Moscow for negotiations to form some sort of a coalition. Because of course, as much as they hate each other, they know what the real goal is, and they should work together towards it. So yeah, people, we if we haven't been clear enough on Russia, we need to do some more of that. And Jonathan, I know you have something you want to say. And before you say it, I will thank Robert Nasser, who is on the show, but super chatting while on the show. Yes, that is possible. And he super chats for the Owen Jones mention tip jar. That is not why we do it, but we do like mentioning Owen Jones and think it's important, and we do like money. So that's a win-win-win. Jonathan.
Thank you, Robert, for the generous donation. So I was watching a video you linked of a speech Ambassador Erdogan gave on Ukraine, where he celebrated essentially Israel's support for Ukraine and how much we stand in solidarity. And he had a few points, and I want to refute them. I've personally been very ashamed by Israel's policy towards Israel, the way Israel acts, and I think it's really shameful, and it's a historical. We're going to pay for it historically. I think it's just really bad. So just a few things he mentioned. So he said we're giving humanitarian aid to Ukraine. It's one of the good things we're doing. The thing is, we're giving humanitarian aid to Hamas as well. So I don't know how special that is. How much is that something to boast about? One other thing we're doing for Ukraine is we're establishing field hospitals. We are doing the same for the Gazans. We've done the same for Syrians. We are treating Ukrainian patients in Israel. We have also treated Yahya Sinwar in Israel. We have Israel is working to provide Ukraine with early warning systems. We are giving the best early warning systems to the Gazans, to our worst enemies. So we are helping them in the easiest things that we can do, that we even do to our worst killers. We are assisting the Ukraine, and our ambassador in the United Nations boasts about it as a sign for our great camaraderie with the people of Ukraine and the nation of Ukraine. And I think that is particularly unfortunate, and there is a nuance here, because Israel is in a unique situation geopolitically, that we kind of need Russia for some things we do in Syria, and that's the excuse among Netanyahu supporters why we are silent about Ukraine. But I don't really buy that. We need Russia for that, and many people are also not sure about that. So generally, Israel's stance on Ukraine is cowardly. It's weak. It's pathetic, and it's just shameful. And I know a lot of Ukrainians who are the biggest Israel supporters, and I wish it was the same the other way around. There are many Israelis who are very strongly pro-Ukraine. You see a lot of Ukraine flags here, but I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's just. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do a mea culpa on that. I will take responsibility in the name of the United States, because if we had been the ally of Israel that we've been a great ally of Israel, but if we had been the kind of ally of Israel we should have been, if we had fought, imagine for a second if we went to war after 9/11, not with Iraq, but with Iran. We've been pretty good in the negotiation with Syria, but not nearly as strong as we should be. So Israel has been relying on Russia not to become an ally of Iran and Syria, but to be useful in those negotiations. Why? Why the hell should Israel give a rat's ass about Russia when they have the United States as an ally? And the answer is because we haven't been as strong an ally as we should have been. I'm not excusing Israel for doing this. I'm just saying part of it's our fault. If we had been stronger, maybe they would have been stronger in that regard too. You're right. It's an outrage that they have tried to stay somewhat neutral in the war between Ukraine and Russia. And I'm embarrassed that I feel like we're a small part of that. shouldn't happen. Going forward, it definitely should not happen. I'm glad they're speaking out now, at least, in favor of Ukraine.
Yeah, we have a comment in the chat, just a correction or to what Jonathan said. It isn't that Israel needs Russia. Russia has been boosting military presence in Syria, which causes real problems, makes it difficult for Israel to militarily respond. Yeah, Israel, takes military action in Syria on a very regular basis, and it very much needs to avoid accidentally killing any Russians because that's not going to lead to anything good for Israel. Akira says, yeah, Ukraine voted for Israel's to cease fire. That's all you need to know. No, it's not all you need to know. I mean, yeah, people, it's very unfortunate that people are not taking the right position on things when they vote in the UN. But Israel has not been on the right side of this since it started. And by the way, Russia has been an enemy to Israel throughout Israel's entire existence, or pretty much throughout Israel's entire existence. And Israel is trying to appease it as it does with all its enemies. And the result is, as is always the result, when you appease your enemies. When you look at the world in the last 100 years, almost everywhere where something bad happens, you can see the long arm of Russia behind it, pulling the strings. It's and American. It's not just American Republicans used to know this. This used to be a consensus in America during the Cold War. Maybe you'd find some Democrats here and there who were pro-Russia, but not like elected to high office. There was a consensus. There were differences on how to deal with it, but people realize this is an enemy, and this is an enemy that has to be contained. It can't be fought because mutually assured destruction, but it is an enemy. And yeah, the fact that it is now the Republicans of all two parties that are unclear about, anywhere from unclear about this to fully supporting America's biggest enemy is scary. Robert, you're in America. I will go to you to respond to that.
No, there's nothing more that I can say about it. I understand the rationale provided by the Israeli government, why they've been so bad on this issue, and I think we in the States have a part of that. But at the same time, I think that they show weakness by compromising in this way, and it's doing them no good. Again, they're stepping up now. Maybe it's not too late for them to make the right stand.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Also, Razi, did you know that Zelensky wanted to come to Israel very soon after October 7th, and Israel refused to have him?
Yeah, Israel welcomed all the countries who had sympathy and said October 7th is terrible, and of course, as soon as Israel started responding, immediately turned on Israel. But the one who actually was asking to stand with Israel, Israel said no. It's really, really a shame. Israel should have been an ally of Ukraine from the start. The fact that they're not supportive enough of Israel is a shame, but understandable considering you offer somebody your friendship and they reject it. By the way, I'm thinking of the suggestion that I be punished for whatever crimes I don't know I committed and become prime minister. Like, as prime minister, you have to deal with this shit. Like, you have to think, okay, there's Ukraine, but then there's Russia here where we need to attack, and of course we don't like them, but we're not going to kill them because they're going to take action against us. And you want to support Ukraine. France just said they might send troops to support Ukraine. On the one hand, and then but then France also just made today a joint statement with Qatar saying that they oppose a ground operation in Rafah, which is a way of saying they support the continued existence of Hamas and their rebuilding to the point that they can do what they promised. And yeah, I don't know how anybody would want to deal with all that crap. Then again, I see who is the prime minister and what kind of person he is, and I'm like, all right, that's what it takes to want to be in that position.
Yeah, I can't even, when I see France being better than the UK in this regard, what the hell? I mean, yes, we need to keep taking this seriously, but at some point, the world is just insane. It was interesting that we had the 100,000 man protest in favor of Israel, not in the UK, but in Paris. What was that, a few weeks after the attacks? How the hell is France better on this than the UK? Sign of the times.
Jonathan?
I don't think France is that bad on anti-Semitism. It's pretty anti-Semitic, but there are a lot of Jews here. So I think the second biggest Jewish community in Europe, if not the third. So that's why I think they're pretty good on that. Also, Germany's been very positive, I think, much better than the UK. Germany, I think, and better than France in the response to October 7th. But yeah, it's so embarrassing when I go and meet friends from Europe who are all very supportive of Ukraine, and but in the same regard, they're also not very supportive of Israel, despite their over being so supportive of Ukraine. So I kind of suspect them for that fact. But nevertheless, Israel should be very strongly in favor of Ukraine, and in favor also for free Iran, which we are not enough. And I think could have been a good opportunity for that. But there's only so much we can do. We're small, still not that powerful country. We in the midst of we have these many superpowers around us. We can't change the world ourselves. And all of our friends are basically asking us to commit suicide. So, and we're trying to wiggle around that. It's as you said, Raz, it's not an easy job. And so far so good, I think. Could have been way worse. Could have been way worse.
Yeah, also could have been better. Had Israel acted immediately. I do want to say, I said I can't handle long usernames, but of course, if it's a username with a super chat, I can all of a sudden I have those abilities. So Mephistophelian, I think is how it's going to be pronounced. Thank you for the super chat. Says, I think we need Israel, as Israel will do what is needed to stop Iran gaining a nuclear weapon. The West will also hesitate. I mean, Netanyahu has been speaking about doing something, I think, since he was first prime minister in the 90s. So yeah, I'm sure that is coming any day now. But until we actually see it happen, look, I think this is something that America should take care of. I don't trust Israel to take care of it. But yeah, the reason for America to support Israel is because it is a beacon of civilization in this area, and it is fighting against an enemy that has come after America, will come after America again, and the same exact thing is true of Ukraine. You don't stand with Ukraine for the love of everything about Ukraine. You stand with them because the country attacking them is your enemy, and it is watching your response. And your response currently, America, is weak. And the response of the guy who might become president again is going to be weaker. It's going to be siding with the enemy. And it's not just Russia that's watching, it's China that's watching. And China will also go after American allies. And you've already told China, look, we're not going to protect our allies. So, because here's something wrong with their internal politics or their culture. So, yeah, this should be very, very clear cut. We're talking about a country, the person who posted that comment that Putin is defending himself. I mean, he's also defending himself when he kills the leader of the opposition in prison. That's defending himself. This is the kind of idea that Putin has. Anywhere where Putin's power is not, he is not the person controlling. He needs to defend himself against. So we have gone over time, but I've gone on a rant. So if either of you have any last comments, or
Oh
both
yeah.
of you.
I just got to say, Mephistophelian has got me concerned because we're thinking Israel Israel now is going to be the seat of Western civilization. It's going to save us from countries like Iran. You know, the UK, the stand they're taking right now, the Brits used to be the seat of Western civilization, really through the late 1900s, 1800s, and arguably into the 1900s and the world wars. We looked to Britain, and eventually the United States took over that position. We're the ones who are going to keep Western civilization alive, both ideologically, culturally, and militarily. And now, oh, wait, we got to count on Israel to keep a country like Iran in line. Well, you know, I can only hope that that's not going to be the case, because if it is, it's not going to work. Israel, as magnificent as they are, cannot do that alone. The British Empire used to be the most powerful force for good in the world. For better or for worse, that included the fact that they were trying to keep the world, trying to civilize the world. We can argue about what they did in India, what they did in Australia, what they did in Africa. They were a force for civilization that was taken over by the United States, who I think got it much more right, arguably a little less quote unquote colonialist and more simply in favor of spreading freedom around the world. If we do not step up the way we need to in support of Israel, Israel has to be the country that saves us, for example, from Iran, that saves us from Islam. Again, I shudder when I see Mephistophelian's comment there in the chat. But in a sense, that's true. We need to support Israel precisely because they are now the ones upholding Western civilization. I don't mean that culturally, oh, we're better than all those other people. That happens to be true. But I mean in terms of politically, in terms of political economic freedom, in terms of individual rights. You know, what rights do Israelis have when they go into Gaza versus what rights are granted by Israelis when Arabs come into Israel proper? You can say the same thing about the way their militaries are handled. You can say the same thing if you flip the script on any of these nations with Israel. There's no question who is Western, who is rights respecting. Who are the freaking good guys in this? Flip the script. Any nation that you think, oh, Israel is keeping them down, and imagine what the rights of Israelis are, what the position of Israelis are in those countries versus what they receive in Israel. We can argue about what's going on in the West Bank. We can argue about what Basal Adra ran into, what Yuval Abraham has exposed in his documentaries. It's absurd when you flip that over and say, what rights have Israel granted versus what rights do Jews have in these other nations? It's well, we all know it's an outrage. There's no question who is in the right here. I don't think, as we've discussed, there's any question about what the solution is, which means the enemies need to be defeated both militarily, spiritually, and ideologically. Sorry, we're running well into the next hour, and I don't want to repeat myself, but if anybody has any doubts, any questions about this conflict, obviously we have an ongoing conversation here on the Ayn Rand Center UK. Thank you for the support, for the super chats, for the comments we've gotten about that. And that's why I think we need to keep putting this out there. We need to keep putting the ideas, the truth, the facts out there, the full context out there. And I'll end my rant there. Thank you.
I do want to, before I go to Jonathan, quickly say to you know, we have occasionally a couple of semi-regular trolls in the chat, and we appreciate the engagement. It helps with the algorithm. We want to get this content to as many people as possible. And every time you comment, YouTube takes note and will likely show it to more people. We do have some red lines. One of which is if you quote somebody, but it's a quote that you make up and you pretend that that is something that person said, even if it's a politician that we hate and talk about how much we hate on this channel, you will be removed. Don't do it again. This is a one strike policy applied from now. And Jonathan.
To finish with an optimistic approach, something that's very concerning now is the talks about the ceasefire. And a possible deal. My hope, and I'm kind of relying on it, is like always, our enemies will save us from ourselves by refusing our appeasement. So I think that's something to be optimistic. History shows that they've always saved us so far from ourselves, except in Oslo. So we can be optimistic that we will go into Rafah and finish the job there, and then we can move elsewhere to finish the job there. So that's the optimistic message.
Let's hope so. Michael asks, should we make bots for the algorithm? Please don't do that. We want real viewers, and we also don't want YouTube to they will notice that. Any last comment? You asked who made a misquote. Scroll up. We don't name trolls. That's also a channel policy. Jonathan, where can people find more of your work?
Our dear viewers can find me on the Substack. You have the link below, Philosophy I Need It. I recently published a very good article on Vermeer. I encourage you to read it.
I like the fact that you rate your own article as very good. Yeah, viewers can check that out. All the links are in the description. Robert, where can people find more of your work?
Yeah, some of the folks in the chat know, and they've made clear, what I do on my podcasts, on my Substack, on my social media is 102% different than what we do here. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak out in ways that don't usually fit my project. But you can find everything I do at robertnacer.com.
And I am at Razi Ginsburg on Twitter. If you saw there is a link in the description as well. And if you saw the tweet that was posted earlier, you can just click subscribe there. Thanks, guys, for joining me. This is one of the longer episodes that we've done on the reality show, but I think it was worth the extra time. We will be back tomorrow. I believe we have a topic. I think tomorrow's title is the Muslim vote. That is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, the Muslim vote in the UK. And tomorrow, the Muslim vote will be cast as well in the UK. So thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.